First of all, the game board is placed in the middle of the table. This consists of a total of 42 areas, each of which is connected by a border or a sea route. These areas form 6 different colored continents. Each player then chooses a color for their troops and places all of their units in front of them. In Risk, there are a total of 5 different colored armies. These are divided into 3 different troop types: infantry, cavalry, and artillery. An infantry represents 1 unit. A cavalry represents 5 units. And the artillery represents 10 units. The players then roll the dice to see who starts. The others follow in a clockwise direction. Depending on the number of players, there are different numbers of starting units. With 3 players, each player receives 35. With 4 players, each player receives 30. And with 5 players, each player receives 25 starting units. Player 1 takes a unit from his supply and occupies an empty area. Then player 2 follows, player 3, and so on. And this continues until all areas are occupied. Now reinforcements are added. Player 1 takes one of his units again and places it on one of his own areas. Then player 2 does the same, player 3, and this continues until all starting units have been placed. Then the defense dice are placed at the edge of the table. The area cards are mixed well and also placed at the edge of the table. A player whose turn it is always goes through 4 steps. In the first step, units are placed. At the beginning, a player always has at least 3 units at his disposal. This number can increase based on cards, areas, and completely occupied continents. You now decide where you want to use your reinforcements. These must always be placed on areas that you have already occupied. You either put all the units in one area or you split them up. The next step, conquering, is probably the most important in the game. First, you decide which area you want to attack from. Then you decide which neighboring enemy area you want to attack from and then how many units you want to attack with. The attacker can choose up to 3 units for this. Once you have decided, you move the respective units to the border. It is important, however, that an area must never be left empty. This means that at least 1 unit must stay behind and the defender can now defend himself with up to 2 of his units. Unlike the attacker, the defender does not have to leave any of his units behind. And now the dice come into play. The attacker rolls a red die for each of his units. The defender rolls a blue die for each of his defending units. Here you can see that the attacker has a clear advantage here. First of all, the dice results are ranked from high to low. Then a pair of dice is formed with the highest result from each party and then the results are evaluated. If the attack die is higher than the defender loses one of his units and puts it back into his supply. This now happens with each pair of dice. A possible single die is then forfeited. However, if a pair of dice is the same or higher, the attacker loses one of his units and must put it in his supply. Now that all pairs of dice have been compared, you take a look at the area. If the defender still has at least 1 unit in his area, it still belongs to him. Any remaining attackers return to their original area. However, if the defender no longer has any of his units in his former area, it now belongs to the attacker. He moves to it with the respective units with which he won it. Regardless of whether you have won or lost, you are free to decide to attack another area, either the same one again, or a different one. Here you are always free to decide whether you want to attack once, several times, or not at all. However, it is not permitted if there is only 1 unit in both the attacker and defender areas. Now that the conquering step has been completed, you move on to the third, moving troops. Here, the player whose turn it is can now position his units better or differently. But don't forget, at least 1 unit must always stay behind. In the last step, the cards are used. If you are able to conquer at least 1 area, you can now draw a card. Attention, even if you are able to conquer several areas, you can only draw 1 card at a time. Then after all these steps, it's the next player's turn. Each of these cards shows 1 area and 1 an infantryman, cavalryman, or artilleryman. With these you can create different sets of cards over the course of the game in order to be able to use more units. Here 3 cards, each with a different troop symbol, form a set of cards. And 3 cards with the same group symbol also form a set of cards. Completely collected sets of cards can be exchanged for units. The first set of cards used in the entire game is worth 4 more units. The second set of cards is worth 6 units. The third 8 and so on. By the way, this is a joker. Here you can freely choose which symbol the card represents. As soon as a player has occupied a certain number of areas at the end of his turn, he has won the game. With 3 players, that is 25 target areas each, with 4 players, 20, and with 5 players, 15. If you like this video, please leave a thumb up and feel free to subscribe this channel. Thank you for watching.